Everyone arrives in Monaco and walks straight to the casino. On a one-day visit, that is the move that quietly eats your best hours and gives you the least back. Skip it as your opening act and the whole day opens up. By the end of this video, you will know exactly where to start instead, how to ride Monaco's free elevators past the hills that exhaust everyone else, where to eat like a local for a couple of euros, and the two best ways to shape your single day here. This is One Day City Guides. Subscribe if you're planning a trip to Europe. We cover a new city every week. Monaco is tiny. It's the second smallest country in the world, a sliver of coastline wedged between the mountains and the sea on the French Riviera, and you can walk across most of it in well under an hour. That smallness is the whole trick to a great day here. You are never far from anything. The catch is that Monaco is also stacked almost vertically up a steep slope, so the distance between 2 points on a map tells you very little about how much climbing sits between them. Get the shape of the day right and Monaco feels effortless. Get it wrong and you'll spend the afternoon sweating up staircases wondering why everyone said this place was small. It wasn't always this small, by the way. A few centuries back, Monaco was far larger, holding the neighboring towns of Menton and Roquebrune along the coast. It lost them in the 1800s, and what's left is the dense little principality you see today. That's part of why everything feels so tightly packed. A whole country has been squeezed into the space most cities would give a single district. So let's deal with the handful of decisions that shape everything before you set foot on a single cobblestone. First, where to base yourself. Monaco really has three zones you care about. There's the old town up on the rock called Le Rocher, where the palace and the cathedral sit. There's the port and market area down in the middle, La Condamine, and there's Monte Carlo on the far side where the casino and the grand hotels are. Most people arrive by train, and Monaco station is built right into the mountain, which actually works in your favor. From there, you're a short walk from all three zones. Second decision, timing your arrival. If you can, be on the rock before late morning. There's a changing of the guard ceremony outside the prince's palace just before noon, and the square fills up fast, so arriving earlier means you see the old town quiet and beautiful before the crowds land. A quick word on how you actually get here, because most people don't stay in Monaco, they come for the day. If you're based in Nice, the train is the easy answer. It runs along the coast in around 20 minutes. It's cheap and the ride itself is half the pleasure, with the sea flashing past the window most of the way. There are buses along the coast too, which are slower but even cheaper and give you the view from the road. Whichever you take, you'll arrive right in the middle of everything, and from that point on, your own 2 feet plus the free elevators do almost all the work. You really don't need a car here, and parking is expensive and awkward, so if you were thinking of driving in, don't. And here's a freeing bit of news on tickets. Almost nothing here needs a timed slot booked weeks ahead the way the Louvre or the Vatican does. The two paid attractions worth your money, the Oceanographic Museum and the Palace State Apartments, you can usually just walk up to on the day, so you can keep your plan loose and follow the weather and your mood. Now, the casino. Here's why starting there is the wrong move. The Casino de Monte Carlo is genuinely beautiful, and you absolutely should see it, but in the morning it barely functions as an attraction. The gaming rooms open in the afternoon, the famous crowd and the parade of cars build later in the day, and if you turn up first thing, you're looking at a closed building and an empty square. You burn your freshest, quietest hours on the one site that's actually better in the evening. Worse, it sets the wrong tone for the day. You came expecting glamour and money, and that expectation pulls you away from the part of Monaco that's genuinely worth your morning. And there's a detail about that casino most visitors never learn. The people of Monaco are not allowed to gamble in it. They never have been. Back in the 1800s, when Monaco was nearly broke, the ruling prince opened the casino to pull in wealthy foreigners, and as part of the bargain, he banned his own citizens from the tables to protect them. In return, Monegasques pay income tax free to this day. So the most famous building in the country is one that its own people are legally barred from playing in. Worth seeing, absolutely. Just not first. Here's what I'd do instead. Walk it off. From the station or the port, make your way up to Le Rocher, the old town on the rock. The climb sounds brutal, and it doesn't have to be, and I'll come back to exactly how in a moment. Once you're up top, the change is immediate. The traffic and the glass towers fall away, and you're in a maze of narrow lanes with pale ochre walls, green shutters, and tiny squares. This is the oldest part of Monaco, and the part that feels like a real place rather than a film set. Give yourself time to just wander here. The lanes are short, you can't really get lost, and the whole quarter is small enough to loop in a slow half hour. It's also the one corner where a local walking guide really earns their fee, because every quiet doorway and worn step up here has a story you'd never guess at on your own. Up on the rock you'll reach the Prince's Palace and its big open square looking out over the sea. This is the actual seat of the family that has ruled Monaco for more than 700 years. And the story of how they got here is better than you'd expect. The very first Grimaldi to take this rock did it by disguising himself and his men as monks. They knocked at the fortress gate one night in the late 1200s, were let in as harmless travelers, then pulled swords out from under their robes and seized the place. To this day, the official coat of arms of Monaco shows two monks holding swords. That trick is literally built into the national symbol. Stand in that square knowing the dynasty began with a con, and the whole principality reads a little differently. If you've timed it well, you'll catch the changing of the guard in the palace square. It happens once a day just before noon, and it lasts only about 10 minutes, so get there a few minutes early and stand near the front. It's a small, formal little ceremony, white uniforms and all, and it's free to watch. Don't build your whole day around it, but if you're already up on the rock for late morning, it's a nice marker to aim for. A quick word on a mistake that catches people right here. Do not treat the rock as a quick photo stop you rush through to get to the casino. The Old Town is the most atmospheric corner of the whole country, and it's also the one most people give about 10 minutes before hurrying off. Slow down, this is the part you'll remember. Near the palace you have two more things worth your late morning. The St. Nicholas Cathedral, where Monaco's princes and princesses are buried, including Grace Kelly, the Hollywood star who became princess here, and it is free to step inside. And then the showstopper, the Oceanographic Museum, perched right on the cliff edge at the tip of the rock. This is not a small town aquarium. The building is carved into the sheer cliff and rises around 85 meters straight up from the sea. It took 11 years to build, and the great ocean explorer Jacques Cousteau ran it for more than 30 years. Inside there are deep tanks, a shark lagoon, and a terrace on the roof with one of the best views in the country. If you only pay to go into one thing all day, honestly, make it this. It earns the ticket and the hour or so it takes. There is a small detail here that says a lot about Monaco. During a restoration a while back, workers found a hidden Grimaldi coat of arms behind a huge painting ringed with the gold initials of the prince who built the place, sealed away and forgotten for about a century. Even the museum had a secret tucked inside its own walls. Keep half an eye out for those little touches as you go around. That is also a natural moment where a guide pays off. The history packed into this one stretch, the palace, the cathedral, the founding story, is exactly the kind of thing a good local guide brings alive in a way a plaque never will, and you can hand off all the navigation and just listen. There's one more place near the port that tells you a lot about this country, even if you don't think of yourself as a car person. The ruling family spent decades building a private collection of classic and racing cars, and it's now open to the public with dozens of gleaming vintage machines and old Formula One racers under one roof. It's a window into how Monaco sees itself, a place where the head of state collects supercars the way other countries collect paintings. It does take a fair slice of your day, so think of it as a trade for the Oceanographic Museum rather than something you squeeze in alongside it. By now you will be hungry, and this is where Monaco surprises people. You can eat extremely well here for very little, and you do it down at the Condamine market near the port. Walk through the covered market hall and you'll find stalls selling the local specialities for just a couple of euros. The one to order is soccer, a thin pancake made from chickpea flour and baked in a big wood-fired oven. It comes out blistering hot and served in a paper cone, crisp and a little charred at the edges, soft in the middle with a good hit of salt and pepper. The other one to try is barbecuing, a little fried pastry stuffed with chard and cheese that is considered Monaco's national dish. 2 or 3 of these from a market stall, eaten standing up among locals doing their shopping, is one of the best meals in the whole country, and it costs a fraction of what you would pay sitting down with a sea view. If you'd rather sit down properly, the move is to walk a couple of streets back from the harbour into the lanes of the Condamine district. The cafes and small restaurants there serve the same Riviera cooking, plenty of fresh fish, pasta and salads at prices that won't make you wince, and they're full of people who actually live and work here rather than other day trippers. A good local lunch a street back from the water is one of the real pleasures of Monaco. One food trap to sidestep. The restaurants right on the casino square and along the most famous stretches charge serious money for fairly ordinary food because you're paying for the address. If you want a sit-down lunch with the view, that is fine, but know that the market food is both cheaper and more local, and the cafes, a couple of streets back from the water, are far better value than the ones on the front row. After lunch is where your day forks, and the fork is simple. You can go culture and sea, or you can go gardens and views. They give you 2 quite different versions of Monaco, so it's worth hearing both before you decide, because the right answer depends entirely on the kind of traveler you are. I will lay them both out, then tell you who each one suits. The first fork is the deep dive into the sea and glamour side. This is when you finally cross over to Monte Carlo and the casino now that it is afternoon and the place has come alive. The square out front is one of the best free shows in Europe, a slow parade of extraordinary cars pulling up under the grand facade. You can step inside the casino's entrance atrium and admire the marble and the gilt for free, no stake required, though if you want to go through into the historic gaming rooms there is an entry fee and a dress code. So leave the shorts and trainers behind. One thing that catches people out and ruins the plan on the spot: to get into the gaming rooms you need a physical passport or a national ID card if you are European. A driving license will not do it, and a photo on your phone will not either. No document, no entry, so carry the real thing if this is on your list. And here is something most visitors walk right over without realizing it. As you make your way between the casino and the harbour, you are walking the actual Formula 1 Grand Prix circuit. For one weekend a year, this is one of the most famous racetracks on the planet. The rest of the time, it is just the ordinary streets of Monaco, open to anyone. That tight hairpin bend the cars crawl around on television is a normal road by a hotel. The tunnel the cars race through is the same tunnel local traffic uses every single day. You can stroll some of the most legendary corners in motorsport with a coffee in your hand and no idea you are doing it unless someone tells you. From there, it is a short, flat walk along the harbour past the super yachts, and you can finish at Lavoto, Monaco's main beach, for a sit down by the water as the day cools off. Right by the beach, there is one small free corner worth knowing about if you have got energy left: a Japanese garden, a calm little park with a koi pond, raked gravel and a wooden tea house. It takes nothing to get into, and after a day of marble lobbies and revving engines, it is a relief to stand somewhere where the loudest sound is water moving over stone. It is the kind of place most visitors never even notice, hidden in plain sight among the towers. The second fork is the quieter, higher route, and it is the one most day trippers never take. Head up to the exotic garden set high on the cliffs on the far side of the rock. It is a steep botanical garden full of giant cacti and succulents from around the world, and the real reason to go is the view. From up there, the whole principality drops away beneath you: the rock, the port, the towers, the sea, all at once. It is the best wide view of Monaco you will get, and because it takes a bit of effort to reach, you will share it with a fraction of the crowd
crowd down below. There is also a cave hidden in the cliff beneath the garden. It is a real grotto deep underground with stalactites and stone chambers you can walk through on a guided visit, and it is about the last thing you would expect under a city this glossy. This higher, slower route is where Monaco feels less like a showroom and more like a strange, beautiful town clinging to a mountain. Now, the thing that makes either of those forks easy and the most useful piece of local knowledge for your whole day, Monaco is riddled with free public elevators and escalators built straight into the hillside, dozens and dozens of them, linking the low streets to the high ones. The locals use them constantly. They are free, they run through the day, and they turn what looks like a punishing climb on the map into a 30-second ride. The mistake almost every visitor makes is grinding up endless outdoor staircases in the heat because they don't know the elevators exist. Look for the public lift signs and use them to get from the port up to the rock or up toward the gardens. This one trick is the difference between a Monaco day that wrecks your legs and one that feels easy. So let me put the money side plainly, because Monaco has a reputation for being only for the rich, and that's only half true. The expensive version of the day is real. You can lose a fortune on a harbourfront lunch, a casino table, and a cocktail with a view, but the great version of the day is almost free. Wandering the old town costs nothing. The cathedral is free, the elevators are free, the Japanese garden by the beach is free, market lunch is a couple of euros. Stepping into the casino atrium to look up at the ceiling is free. The only real spend you need is the Oceanographic Museum and maybe one garden ticket. You do not need to be wealthy to have a brilliant day in Monaco. You just need to know which things are worth paying for and which things cost nothing at all. So here are the two ways I'd actually shape the day, depending on what kind of traveler you are. If you want to see it all, go like this. Start mid-morning up on Rocher and wander the old town while it's quiet. Catch the changing of the guard before noon at the Palace Square. Step into the cathedral, then spend an hour at the Oceanographic Museum and its rooftop. Ride an elevator down to the Condamine market for a soccer and barbecue and lunch. Then cross to Monte Carlo for the afternoon. See the casino now that it's lively. Walk the harbour past the yachts and finish with your feet up near Lavoto Beach as the light softens. That's the full sweep, and it works because you've front-loaded the quiet and saved the spectacle for when it actually performs. If you'd rather go slow and deep, do less and feel more. Spend a long, unhurried morning on the rock, really wandering the lanes, sitting in a small square with a coffee, taking the cathedral and the museum at a gentle pace. Have your market lunch, then take the high route up to the exotic garden in the afternoon. Sit with that enormous view and take the rest of the day slowly. You'll see fewer things, but you'll come away feeling like you understood the place rather than ticked it off. One last thing, and it's the trap that catches day trippers at the end. A lot of people visiting Monaco are based in Nice or somewhere else along the coast and are heading back by train or bus in the evening. Check the time of your last connection before you get comfortable, because it's very easy to settle into a harbourfront drink at dusk, lose track of the hour, and realize you've cut it fine. So fix one thing in your head now, know your last train or bus time before the afternoon slips away, and build your evening backward from it. Do that and you get to enjoy the golden hour by the water without the panic. We've linked our favorite local Monaco tours and experiences in the description below. They are good value, smaller groups, and they handle the logistics so you just show up and enjoy it. Tell us in the comments how you would spend your one day in Monaco and keep watching for the next guide.